Research proposal by Alan Materney. The problem statement. How do athletes perceive communication with their coaches and themselves, and how does it affect their successes? The purpose of this study. How do coaches communicate with their players? How do athletes best respond to different coaching styles? Which coaching styles do athletes prefer the most? And to characterize students' perceptions about the level of communication with their coaches and how it impacts them. The research questions. How do athletes perceive communication between themselves and their coaches? How do athletes best respond to different coaching styles? And which coaching styles do athletes prefer the most? Some definitions of the terms. Learning styles. An individual's unique approach to learning based on strengths, weaknesses, and preferences. Coaching power. How a coach uses their power and influence on their players to shape them as athletes. Communication competence. How well a coach can relay information appropriately to their players. Intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from inside the athlete. And affinity seeking, the process by which individuals attempt to get other people to like and to feel positive towards them. Review of related literature. Communication by the coaches. There are many different approaches. Some are more aggressive and some are passive. Some physical and vocal, others use a lower voice. Every coach is different, but all have some form of power. The coaches can influence players in different ways, such as player satisfaction and how athletes work. Coach power use. A study led by Terman explored the influence of athletes' playing status on perceptions of coach power use and how it served as predictors of athletes' satisfaction in their sports. It assessed by using a revised version of the power-based measure developed by Roach. The data showed that starters perceived higher levels of reward power of their coaches compared to non-starters. Terman stated that a coach's effectiveness is also directly tied to their ability to communicate power over athletes, suggesting that power relies on and requires the communication. Another study conducted by Terman observed athletic coaching from an instructional communication perspective. It studied the influence of coaches' experience on high school wrestlers' preferences and perceptions of coaching behaviors. Players perceived and preferred more autocratic coaching behaviors at the end of the season than the beginning. Both players and coaches realized there was less positive feedback at the end of the season than the beginning. Experienced coaches regarded themselves as less autocratic at the end of the season than the beginning, which was the opposite of their less experienced colleagues. Athlete satisfaction. A study conducted by Farrow inquired about coaches' use of affinity-seeking strategies and the effect on a player's satisfaction. Affinity-seeking strategies can be used by coaches to modify their coaching styles. The results of the survey showed that athletes who were surveyed were extremely satisfied members of their prospective teams. Based on the results, Farrow assumed that a coach's use of affinity-seeking strategies has a role in determining the satisfaction of his or her players. Communication competence. Watson used a survey adapted from the Wyman's Communication Competence Scale to survey 32 athletes and asked them questions on how competent they felt their coach was when it came to communicating with them. The data determined that the players reported that they were not motivated by their coach to perform well in their various sporting events. It also determined that it was possible that athletes' motivation was intrinsic and not extrinsic, which could be why the coach's levels of communication competence did not mean anything to them. Aggressive versus passive communication. A study by Casey and Infante observed coaches' efforts to solicit better performance from male athletes related to the athletes' perceptions of their coach's communication, and to the athletes' self-reports of satisfaction and performance. The players were asked to consider the tactics their coaches used to get players to try harder and better. Studies showed that the coaches' attempts to influence male athletes' performance affected male athletes' perceptions of communication. Also suggested that coaches who communicated more aggressively were perceived as less encouraging in terms of communication, and coaches who communicated more aggressively had lower win-loss records. Intrinsic motivation. A study conducted by Amoros and Horn studied the relationships among athletes' intrinsic motivation, gender, scholarship status, perceptions of the number of their teammates receiving scholarships, and perceptions of their coach's behavior. The data concluded that perceived coaching behaviors were related to athletes' intrinsic motivation. also revealed that educators who exhibited a more autonomous teaching style scored higher in intrinsic motivation than those who had more controlling educators. Students' perspectives of coaching behaviors. Coaches can provide instruction, positive feedback, and praise, or they can intimidate, criticize, and control them. According to Matozik and Cox, there are 5 perceived coaching behaviors: autonomy support, controlling use of rewards, negative conditional regard, intimidation, excessive personal control. These behaviors can have a huge impact on how an athlete perceives their coach. Another study conducted by Hollenbeek and Amorose surveyed 280 athletes from a variety of Division I sports. They were asked to complete the leadership scale for sports, which is used to assess various coaching behaviors. The athletes assessed the coach's decision-making styles, the motivational tendencies, and the instructional tendencies. The data showed that positive feedback from the coach was a significant predictor for both relatedness and perceived competence. Students' perspectives of coaching behaviors. Stewart conducted a study that reached over the course of 10 years. He surveyed 542 students in introductory coaching classes. He asked to describe the behaviors of the worst coach they ever had. 8 themes were categorized as traits: personality, the negative behavior, communication, favoritism, lack of knowledge, lack of teaching, personal habits, and lack of care. Some bad types of communication listed were yelling, screaming, cursing, and being critical to players in public. Summary of the study will be a mixed methods research. Quantitative study will involve a survey. Athletes will be given an adapted form of the Wyman's Communication Competence Scale. They will rate items from 0 to 4. The other half will be a qualitative study with an interview of the coaches. This will be about 15 to 20 minutes long. Questions will be what are your main forms of communication with your players? What types of coaching styles do you use most often with your players? Population sample. There will be 2 sample groups: athletes from spring sports teams at Bethany College, such as baseball, softball, men's lacrosse, and men's and women's basketball. Attempt to survey all athletes from spring sports. Coaches from spring sports teams at Bethany College too, such as baseball, softball, men's lacrosse, and men's and women's basketball. Interview all 5 coaches from spring sports. Variables and hypotheses. The independent variable, the coach's different coaching styles, how they use their different styles to communicate with their players. The hypothesis, athletes perform better when coaches use positive coaching styles and when they communicate positively with their players. Instrumentation will be a survey adapted from Wyman's Communication Competence Scale. The interview will be asked questions about gender, how many years have they coached, were they collegiate athletes themselves, and coaching styles that they use. Data analysis. Survey data collection will be a frequency table, look for the similarities in results, and interview data collection. So with a code book, look for the similarities in coaches' interviews, question responses. Possible outcomes. Athletes prefer certain types of coaching styles, such as a positive or negative style. Successful coaches use the same types of coaching styles. Certain coaching styles help foster more successful teams. The conclusion. The proposed research is designed to characterize college athletes' perceptions of communication between coaches and themselves. The purpose is to identify coaching styles viewed as most and least effective. The study will be beneficial for all coaches of any sport. It can be used to see what types of coaching styles are best perceived by players and which styles are used by successful teams. Here are all the references used in this PowerPoint. Thank you.